Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Coffee Break podcast. Today we're diving into a big topic, how to reinvent customer loyalty beyond discounts. Loyalty sounds simple, points, discounts, rewards, but in reality it's broken. Customers sign up for dozens of programs and barely use them. So here's the real questions. How do you build loyalty that works even when customers aren't buying? To break this down, I'm joined by Jed Strong. He is the Enterprise Sales Director of Adjoe, where he helps brands drive real engagement and long-term loyalty. Before Adjoe, he helped scale Playback Rewards and co-founded a venture-backed loyalty startup. He also worked with brands like Visa, Xbox, and PlayStation. We have a lot to cover. Jed, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Klaus.
Jed, let's dive into it. Why do most loyalty programs start wrong or start strong and then stop working completely?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's really rooted kind of in the history of loyalty programs, right? Which is most merchants, retailers, brand leaders, they are looking to reward for purchases. And that makes complete sense within the context of driving their business forward and their P&L. And there's clear signal there. You can reward very clearly and plainly for a transaction. I think what has really evolved over the last couple of years is that first, I think we can agree we've reached a tipping point in promotional saturation, right? And you are training your customers to act in a certain way or expect certain things that might ultimately not benefit your bottom line. It might benefit the top line, but not so much the bottom line. And then, of course, there's the notion of this relationship is very transactional. It is one-to-one rewarding a purchase and getting points or some other kind of reward for a purchase. That's all fair and well, but I think as we look forward, particularly for e-commerce leaders, it's how do you create a deeper and more durable relationship with your customer? And so I think what's beautiful now is there's really been a step change in the ability to accurately track and reward actions beyond purchases. And what that's enabled is leading brands are shifting towards rewarded engagement, right? Rewarding time and attention and micro actions to stay relevant between transactions and avoid, quite frankly, over discounting. And that's one of the ways Adjoe comes in, right? Our primary product is Arcade, and we're able to reward engagement and rather than spend so that brands can really create these kind of habitual touch points with customers without eroding their margin.
Okay, let me cut in there. But it was quite interesting. And you mentioned a couple of very important things there for our listeners. First of all, you train your customer for a certain way to achieve discounts or get a loyalty points or whatever is behind your loyalty program. And obviously everyone is doing basically the same. So you're not really standing out in the market. It's just like the same all over again. And people might just be annoyed or just not using it. What frustrates customers the most when it comes to the classic loyalty programs and apps?
It is the classic, I'd say, balance between earn and burn, right? And from what I see in the market and talking to leaders, not just within the context of e-commerce, but whether it's brands like McDonald's, whether it's airlines like Delta, et cetera, right, is that there is a general frustration from their customers with respect to their ability to earn at scale. Quite frankly, the difficulty in achieving a meaningful earn in points, and if you're using airlines as the example, right, there's only so many of us that take enough flights per year to really generate meaningful rewards or miles. And so you're just never kind of quote unquote reaching scale as an end user with your rewards. Or if you are on the other side of the ledger, there is the quote unquote burn side of the ledger, right? Are you able to redeem those points for something that is meaningful to you? And that is the other evolution within the space. And what I see in the market as well is brands that are looking not only to solve for their customers' earning power and give them more ways to earn, but give them more meaningful ways to use their points that might not have historically been directly tied to their core product or value prop. Right. So airlines, how do we expand that? You look at a partnership like United and Lyft, right? How do we create a partnership where there's now new ways to earn by linking the programs together? And then you as the end customer can therefore decide, I can use my Mileage Plus miles for my Lyft rides and my Lyft points for potential flights downstream.
Makes perfect sense. And I must smile because airlines, I'm the worst example of that. I have traveled for the last 8 years, basically. I'm a digital nomad. So many airlines, every time I want to have reward points, it's on a different carrier. It's a different thing. So I never really can use them. And that creates frustration. And I have some very favorite airlines where I would be more in contact with. And that will bring me to the next thing. But I do not really have a reason if I'm not buying a ticket from them. Now, you mentioned reward for engagement. In simple terms, what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And this can really take a variety of forms, but I think I'll ground this in the context of what we do at Adjoe, right? And at a high level, you can think of Adjoe and really a platform that we call Arcade as a rewarded engagement layer that sits between a brand's app or a merchant's built-in loyalty experience on web, right? So instead of asking customers to buy something to earn value, customers can earn rewards for engaging with, in the case of Adjo and Arcade, playing their favorite mobile games. So think major titles like Candy Crush, Monopoly Go, and quite frankly, thousands more. And they're playing only for a few minutes at a time. They're completing event milestones within these games, things like that. And they're earning rewards for that behavior. And I think what's important about how that economics or how the economics flow out for our partners. So again, whether it's a QSR like McDonald's, whether it's an airline like United, right, is the rewards aren't funded by the merchant themselves. They're actually funded by the mobile game studios who are paying for that engagement. So the brand or the merchant in this case is deciding how much of that rewarded value to share with their customers as rewards and also how much they want to keep for themselves. So you're not training customers to wait for a sale, but you're also not eating into your margins. So in many cases, what you'll see, and this is starting to happen with rewarded engagement, which is this is not only a new product value prop that you're bringing into your platform as an e-commerce leader, et cetera, but you're actually generating incremental revenue while giving customers that's fun to engage with.
I like this approach because a lot of people are playing games and permanently in contact, but not with your brand. Now, this gives a way to show your brand while they're doing something very different. Talk me through about how does my brand come into the game? I mean, obviously, that's the main thing that brands want to have. There must be some AI in the background. Or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot we can unpack there. We'll start with how your brand kind of comes to life within the context of Arcade, right? And for Adjo, Arcade is a white label solution. So if you're again using an example like McDonald's, right? By partnering with Adjo, you will create within your app the McDonald's Arcade. And it is a fully branded McDonald's experience that's creating this very much own kind of mobile gaming hub within your app or website. And so what that then launches is you have dozens of titles that are surfaced to the end user. And it's very clear to the end user what rewards they're able to earn for playing each game. And so they can decide not only what to play by what game appeals to them, of course, from maybe genre perspective or otherwise, whether it's a puzzle title or a strategy title. But also, they clearly understand upfront before they decide to play what their earning opportunities are. And I think it's really clear to reinforce that when these rewards are surfaced to them, in the case of this example being McDonald's, it's McDonald's points, right? This is integrated directly into their core loyalty system and rewards ledger. It's not a competing ledger, so to speak. Um, but then the user experience, when you ultimately through the McDonald's arcade select a game like Monopoly Go, if you are an iPhone user, this leads you right to the App Store as it would otherwise if you were going to play that game. And then once you download that title, you're able to start earning those rewards that I mentioned previously. But the magic behind it for our partners is that through our technology, as you're playing that game as the end user, you're going to be surfaced, whether it's push notifications, toast notifications, etc., when you have earned, that is McDonald's points that redirect you ultimately back into the McDonald's app to then collect those points, etc., and then ultimately use them on perhaps your next egg McMuffin, et cetera, right? Or drive you to the store as a result, right? So that's kind of the user experience and the magic behind it.
Okay, I have so many questions. So the first, they're coming from the background of e-commerce and being a digital marketer. Now, first of all, from the marketing side of things, I want to know what KPIs do I get back as a merchant?
Yeah, no, and that I think is the critical question, and it really depends certainly on what vertical you're focused in. But let's double click into merchants specifically, right? And so when I'm in conversations with merchants, this really does tie back to how are we increasing, or how am I increasing my customers' lifetime value, right? It is very much not about I would say, how do I just increase raw monetization of my end users, right? So it's how do we create these novel earning opportunities that empower your customers to have more loyalty points, et cetera, that then increase their order size through your site or drive greater frequency in going to your site. And then I would say a secondary consequence, I would always say customer lifetime value is first for merchants. But then the second would be creating a more sustainable, I use that word durable relationship with your customer and keeping yourself top of mind for when your users aren't necessarily thinking about buying, right? And I think that's really critical as merchants think about, okay, how do I evolve my relationship with my customer? Right. This is, as I like to think in numbers. And again, as a merchant, you're engaging your customer less than 1% of the time as is. That's just a simple fact of the way your business works. And so it's how do you inject yourself in a meaningful way in their lives the other 99% of the time? And that's what I really think we thrive at doing here at Adjoe.
Brings me to my next question, also from the marketing side of things. Obviously, you want to integrate this into your normal marketing flow, into your normal marketing messages. From the e-commerce perspective, what's a good example or case study that you can share with our listeners?
A great example, quite frankly, would be our partners at Fetch here in the US. They're one of our biggest partners. They're a great example. And I think for them, their focus wasn't just growth, right? Like their primary value prop obviously is very focused on consumer packaged goods in retail, right? And they empower their customers to earn rewards by scanning their receipts or sharing their receipts online. And their focus wasn't just growth, it was increasing how often users open their app or came to their site and stay engaged between those receipt scans. And so after introducing Arcade, what Fetch saw was very meaningful lifts in engagement. And, as I mentioned earlier, that customer lifetime value increased actually about 10% across their user base by integrating Adjoe. So again, because we were giving users more reasons to come back to their site and to their app when they even weren't actively shopping. And so we see similar patterns across a lot of our partners. And I think the takeaway again is that when customers earn value through their time and attention, their behavior changes. And once those new habits form, everything downstream tends to improve.
I can see a lot of customer personalities out there where that would be a perfect fit. From your perspective, do you have any examples where you see the most results?
What's beautiful about our technology and partners is that we tend not to discriminate by vertical, right? Because there really is an application no matter whether you're an e-commerce leader, whether you're a brand or loyalty leader at a fuel and convenience brand like 7-Eleven, right? Because at the end of the day, the experience that we're powering is through mobile games. And that is an experience that, 2/3 of people across the globe play mobile games at least once a week, right? It is a universally engaging experience. And so a lot of my time is spent with our partners, helping them understand the relationship between their audience and mobile games, right? And I think what's always interesting to me, Klaus, is, you know, we have a lot of data at our disposal, right? And that's in some cases where the AI comes in and how we're able to make the experience, I would say, more engaging and intelligent for our users. But pulling back from that, what we're really able to do, and what I see really frequently with our partners, pretty much across categories, is that we and our users over index in terms of having visited a merchant site or having a brand partner's app on their phone as compared to the average US adult, by way of example, when I'm speaking to US based brands. And so the quote unquote penetration of mobile gaming is extremely strong, and really extends across verticals. And the last thing I would say about that too, Klaus, is that there's usually a conception, or sometimes a conception, and this, I get it. I've spent most of my career in and around gaming, of who gamers are, right? And I think that comes historically from like PC and console gamers, right? And that's traditionally skews heavily male, right? Younger. People perceive the earning power is a little bit lower. With mobile games, it is almost completely inverted. 60% of our audience, in terms of arcade users through our partners, are women. And then our core demographic are women between the ages of 25 to 44. And I think that surprises a lot of people. And certainly they have not only significant earning power themselves, but really control kind of the household pocketbook, right? And that's another reason a lot of partners engage with us.
It's a very interesting finding that you have there. I'm in the core, as I said, a marketer, and what I do in the subway or wherever, I just look around because I'm curious and I want to find out what people do on their phones. I do this regularly. It might sound creepy, but for me, it's market research. And I'm not surprised by your results because I can see that a lot of people are playing games. Now, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the implementation and the technical setup. How does that work?
Yeah, sure. I would say we take pride in the fact that onboarding is usually measured in weeks, not months. Most of the work is actually alignment. So deciding where Arcade fits in the customer journey rather than necessarily the heavy technical lift. So it's designed to be lightweight and flexible. It typically integrates into either a brand's existing app or, a merchant, e-commerce merchant's loyalty experience, often usually based via web-based modal or SDK within their native environment. And then on the back end, we integrate through a standard set of APIs for rewards issuance and tracking. So it works alongside existing loyalty programs or CRM systems rather than replacing them, which I think, is really important both to us, but also to our partners as well. And I think a couple other call outs I would share. One, I think what brands appreciate is that they don't need to re-architect anything. You can start with a single placement, in this case, the arcade placement that would launch a mobile games experience for your customers, learn how those customers engage, and then scale over time. This is very much intended to be kind of a crawl, walk, run approach. And the other thing I would call out is pricing, because that's always the question, right? And I'll briefly answer that because it's simple. There's no flat license or upfront cost. So we operate on a revenue share model. And merchants, all of our partners do, but I think merchants in particular appreciate this because it's very low risk, right? The economics scale with engagement and not ahead of it. So you're never paying for something before your customers are actually using it. And that's the way we operate.
Okay, so you answered already my next question. And I like the approach that it implements with what you already have. So you don't need to rip everything off that you have or get rid of software that you love and as just adds on, and gives you a additional chance to make it work and to reach your customer more often. So I like really this approach makes really sense. Now, before our coffee break comes to an end today, is there anything you want to share with our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
When I think of our partners and our customers and what advice I would give, particularly to e-commerce merchants, right, is I suppose, and we, not just me, but I think we as a company really encourage our partners and specifically e-commerce players to focus less on squeezing the next conversion and more on how they earn the next interaction with their customer, right? I think we can all agree e-commerce is really great at efficiency, but durable brands are built by showing up with value even when their customers aren't ready to buy. And to do that, you need real systems and not just campaigns, right? Your habits and your customers' habits compound. So if your customers have reasons to come back regularly, and I mentioned this earlier, really everything else downstream tends to follow.
Yeah, I like this approach because obviously it's very expensive to acquire a new customer, and just throwing more money on ads doesn't really make sense if you have customers that you can sort of activate and continue to serve in different ways of communication and just build up a relationship with them. And I think Adjoe is a perfect example on how you can do this. Now, final question, where can people go and find out more about Adjoe?
Yeah. So our website is www.adjoe.io. And of course, they can always feel free to reach out through the blog posts on the podcast, etc. They can always find ways to reach me. I'm always happy to have conversations with prospective partners.
Cool. I will put a link in the show notes, then you're just one click away. Jed, I hope a lot of people will reach out to you. I think that's a very brilliant way to start a communication with your customer. And a lot of e-commerce merchants are basically the perfect platform to use Adjoe. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks very much, Klaus. Take care.